What happened?
I'm just trying to get my my groove. You know what I'm saying,
Your
Pete?
mojo? Did you lose
I wanted
your
to say
mojo?
mojo, but that's kind of like it's kind of cheesy. Mojo. I think groove is cooler.
Like Austin Powers lost his mojo, and you're trying to get it back.
No, I'm trying to get into my Emperor's New Groove. You know what I'm saying? It's a great movie.
Classic.
Anyway, as the wonderful Patrick Wahlberg. Wait, is that his name?
Patrick Wahlberg?
Who voices Kronk in the Emperor's New Groove?
I don't have the slightest clue.
I think. Wait 1 second. Audience. Wait 1 second. Hold your horses. Or Joe from Family Guy, if you're more familiar. Family Guy. Who's his voice?
Or Might Guy from Naruto.
Patrick Warburton. I was right.
Warburton.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as Patrick Warburton would say, it's like, oh yeah, it's all coming together.
Oh my God.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everyone and everything in between, welcome to the Stay Positive Podcast. I am Alex, and I'm joined by...
Pete. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm alive after the last few days, unfortunately.
You've been feeling kind of sick.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was very down very bad for a few days. But we're back now.
We're back and better than ever, baby.
Yes. Fun fact, I haven't had antibiotics in years. And for the first time in, I think, it seems like 5 years, I finally took some, and I feel like a new person, even though I don't sound like quite the same.
You sound lovely, Pete. Don't get it twisted. You sounded a lot worse a few days ago.
Yeah. Well, I don't think you got to talk to me, but
Yeah, your voice probably was like non-existent.
it was non-existent. So we're good.
Yeah.
But
It's kind of, when going about your day, we have free time. How do we like to spend it, Pete? Reading books?
yeah, I mean, I'm a very avid reader, so
You'd say so?
yeah, I've been making it a real thing to read every single day after I've graduated, of course, and then I just want it to be a part of my
Routine.
routine, ritual of every day. So
It's a good ritual to have. I, unfortunately, have the ritual of avoiding reading every day.
why?
Because I'm an idiot. But that's beside the
Come
point.
on.
Pete.
Self-love, man.
Self-love. I'll get there one day, Pete. I'll try. Read anything good, Pete, lately?
Yeah, so the big topic of today's podcast is on a book I read. It's called Why Nations Fail by, I'm going to butcher this guy's name for sure, but I want to assume he's Turkish, Daron Acemoglu. I don't know if that's correct. And Simon Robinson. Or is it James Robinson?
Simon or James Robinson? Or is it both? It's James.
James S. Robinson, right?
James A.
Okay.
Robinson.
James A. Robinson.
As far as what
Okay.
I can see here.
Two very, very learned scholars within economics and political science. I think that they're quite smart. And so, anyways, I read this book because I've been trying to read it for a while, and I slowly made my way through it during the semester, but didn't actually get to put a dent in it until after I graduated.
What's the book called again?
Why Nations Fail.
That's okay.
What's your first reaction or impression?
Sounds like an interesting topic. Maybe some people would like to read it now in our current circumstances.
Yeah, I mean,
I think the whole world could stand to read a book like that.
yeah. As long as it's something you can learn from, then of course.
Yeah, you don't always have to agree with stuff, but learning something new every day, I think, is pretty cool.
Yeah, I also do that. I try to do that every single day. That's the big reason I read books.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, sometimes you want to read prose or fiction too, but nonfiction books like this,
Yeah.
they're quite illuminating.
Stupid trivia fact: did you know that if you drop a slinky, the bottom won't fall until the top catches up to the bottom? It's crazy. It's gravity defying. And I love it.
I don't think so.
It's real,
sense.
Pete. This is real. This is real. Like
no. I know it. I know it's real. I'm saying I don't think it's that surprising.
But it's funny because it's just like basically hovering until the top catches to the bottom. Weird trivia facts aside.
That's how springs work. So,
Yeah.
Anywho, back to the topic. Basically, this book is literally called "The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty." Yeah, or the subtext is the origins of power, prosperity, poverty.
Poverty, prosperity. Okay, so it's like money related.
Yeah, well, the whole essence of the book is economics based. So, I mean, obviously, when you talk about power, prosperity, and poverty, you need to include some kind of
Yeah,
economic
yeah.
introduction, right?
The social
So,
science.
basically, they try to explain this idea or using the overarching idea of new institutional economics, or NIE for short, because I don't want to keep saying that the whole time.
Okay, new institutional economics, or better known as NIE.
Yeah.
All right, so
Basically, new institutional economics, or NIE,
yes, yes, we got it.
is an economic perspective that attempts to extend the traditional field of institutional economics by focusing on institutions, so social and legal norms within society.
So like companies or businesses or governments.
No, not necessarily. Just institutions in general on a larger scale.
Oh, okay, so just like groups of people, organizations.
Yes, organizations is a better way to coin it, because
Got it.
sometimes companies are very, very small. Small businesses, for instance, you can't really consider them an institution, right?
Yeah, I get it. I
You
get
could
it.
for sure consider Amazon an institution, though.
Yeah. Okay. Institutions. Got it.
Yeah. So they focus on institutions, this social and legal norms that, pervade our society through institutions, and basically try to find an explanation for how those things underpin economic activity at its foundation.
Okay.
So, whereas traditional institution economics and I guess neoclassical economics focus on the evolutionary process of human beings and the role of institutions in shaping supply and demand behavior, NIE rather adds that stuff all together, plus the fact that individuals like myself and you are rational people and we want to maximize our preferences, but we also have cognitive limitations, which is, pretty standard to think, like, obviously.
Who said I was rational, Pete?
Okay,
Who made that big mistake?
Classic. Anyways, as a result of these limitations, obviously, we have difficulty monitoring and enforcing agreements or transactions. And so we form institutions to monitor and enforce these transactions.
Okay.
Side note, I really want to know what the authors would think of Ethereum. Back to the show.
Buy
Anyways.
Bitcoin, buy Ethereum.
So, yeah, that's NIE for short,
Okay.
basically. I think it's an interesting topic, and the fact that it does introduce cognitive and I don't know how much behavioral psychology, but cognitive psychology and the limitations of cognitive psychology, is very important, because human beings, economic activity relies on human beings, obviously.
Yeah.
Right? So human beings are limited because of our abilities to make decisions in certain ways that are governed by electrical impulses in our brain.
How we think based on our circumstances.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I like the fact that this theory
Includes that.
includes those limitations. So the book takes that overarching agenda, you could say,
Okay.
and basically the general premise is that institutions can be one of two things. They can be extractive, which is an institution that seeks to exclude the populace from political decision making and income distribution.
So, in other words, they're on their own and they don't rely on the people. Like they don't put the people into consideration.
Yes, think authoritarian regimes.
Lovely.
Or inclusive ones, the ones that do the exact opposite and seek to include the populace. So think more democratics.
Lovely.
Institutions. So yeah, I mean, extractive institutions are things like slave states, serfdom, dictatorships, totalitarian regimes.
I feel that's relatively outdated for most countries.
I mean, dictatorships still exist.
Not in our good old US of A.
Oh, okay. Well, the US of A doesn't have an extractive political institution.
whereas they have other extractive institutions.
Yes, but we could get to the USA later. We could get to the others later. North Korea, for instance, has an extractive
Of
political
course.
institution. Singapore is an authoritarian regime.
Really?
Yeah, they are.
I thought it was a cool place.
No, they have an authoritarian government.
Uh,
Most Eastern countries do.
not all. Japan,
Japan doesn't.
Korea,
South
of the
Korea.
South, Korea,
North
yeah.
Korea, extremely, obviously.
Singapore is. When you say authoritarian, it's still like a president, right? It's just the president has like all the power.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's also one city, so it's like not. I don't want to say not bad, but like it's still just one city. It's a lot easier to manage a city than a country. If I were to be a leader.
I know. It's just that Singapore is still technically a country, and there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
It's a beautiful country, a city, country, whatever.
I've never been. I want to go.
Everyone says it's like, everyone's like Tokyo and Seoul and Shanghai, but it's like also Singapore is always like one of the top like Eastern Asian countries that's like visit this place.
Had a teammate that was from Singapore as well.
Okay. Apparently there's no litter, which like when I visit New York nowadays in like the last year, I just can't imagine a city without litter, you know what I'm saying? It would be like a eighth wonder of the world if I saw that.
Anywho.
Tangents aside.
Yes.
Okay, authoritarian, interactive, or
Extractive
and inclusive, social inclusion. Got it.
Yeah, no, not social. Well,
Extractive is like authoritarian, and inclusive is
democratic.
Democratic. Got it.
Yes, you could say liberal democracy or democracy, whatever.
So far, so good.
Democracy. So, basically, there are a lot of different ways that societies have progressed. And there are a lot of different types of societies that exist within our overarching human civilization, right?
Of course, cultures develop.
Yes. So, initial conditions for sustainable development, they have different starting points in different societies. Some places, though, they may have the same initial conditions.
Of course.
However, factors that are included within the system can eventually result in vastly different end states. As you know, the butterfly effect is a thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, in this example, two institutes start in the same position, but the decisions they take lead to two different results.
Yeah. Actually, there are two very good examples. First of all, North Korea, South Korea, right?
Yeah.
Same
place.
Same geography, same demographic.
Same original culture, and then...
Yeah, but two vastly different end games right now.
Welcome to humanity, where...
Right?
At the first sign of disagreeing, you just split off and start your own style of leading.
Obviously, it's a lot more complicated in Korea than that.
No, obviously in Korea, but in general, welcome to humanity.
So, the first chapter literally does that. It compares a town in Arizona with a town in Sonora, Mexico. And they're literally named the same thing, Nogales.
Okay.
And basically, same as North and South Korea, they have the same geographical landscape, same climate, same relative demographic, but wildly different prosperity and poverty levels. Which, it makes no sense, but a lot of sense at the same time.
Certain decisions lead to better outcomes.
Yeah.
You got to roll those dice sometimes.
Right? There's a big difference, especially in the way that the U.S. and Mexico have managed to demonstrate stable rates of sustainable economic growth and technological progress.
Yeah. Hong Kong and China, like before recent times, they were kind of two separate things. Hong Kong had their own politics and everything, and they were one of like the cultural hubs of the world. So they live in the same area, like they're really close to other like places like Shanghai, but they operate differently and have different culture, different results, different atmosphere. So even with something as simple as like a twin, like if you have two people who are literally genetically identical, if you raise them in two different environments, they'll grow up to be two different people.
Of course, and I mean you've seen this with twins separated at birth, obviously,
Yeah.
right?
But
It doesn't matter if you are the same exact initial state. Sometimes
you can go down a
factors,
completely different road.
yeah, factors are introduced that completely change the paradigm. So I thought it was interesting that there are literal case studies in this in our world today
Yeah.
that make sense.
Nice.
It's unfortunate, but
Why is
you
it
know,
unfortunate?
it's unfortunate that some places that are built for lack of better terms, built for greatness or built for prosperity, but
I
they're
mean,
just they achieve the exact opposite.
you'll never know which one succeeds until the end.
I know we had this conversation about who wins out, the creator or the destroyer, and what is the essence of everything. But
That's not. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you could tie that in, but it's more so. It's like, I watched a show, or I watched an episode of a show, and in that show, it was like a Survivor kind of show,
mhm.
and they had to survive like 6 weeks on an island by themselves. And one guy was hunting fish with a spear,
Yeah.
and he was like the best guy in out of the 10 guys,
Mhm.
and he was able to catch like at best like 4 to 6 fish a day. And then there was this other guy who found a net, like a fishing net. It was a little broken, so he had to fix it. But he spent his time only with the fishing net. He never went gathering berries or gathering resources or going fishing like the main man. He was using the fishing net, and several of the people were scolding him and saying, I don't trust you, you're an idiot, you're wasting your time and energy on that stupid fishing net, and you're not helping. We're doing all this hard work and you're sitting on your butt with a fishing net. And what was very interesting is he didn't succeed right away. Like the first few days when he put the fishing net out at sea,
Mhm.
nothing came out, and everyone got angrier. There's like, you're really like useless, you're not helping. But then came like one day where he caught something. So remember, the main guy, the best, strongest guy, he could always only his best was catching 6 fish in a day. The first day he caught a fish, he caught 24 fish.
Ooh.
And in the analysis video, it highlighted that like sometimes creative people or creative choices pay off. Not always. Creativity should not be a substitute for like hard work. Like, you need both in a society, because you could just fish brute force style, but as humans we've proven brain beats brawn, and we always try to find more efficient ways of doing things. And you could do it the old way, where you could just get your spear and try and stab the fish, or you can create a net or create technology to help you catch more fish, which is not only more efficient as far as how much you catch, but it's more efficient how much energy you expend for how much you catch, since it's much easier. And it's the two guys are on the same island. They got the same work, but one chose one path, the other chose the other. And while in the short term the first guy was more successful and the crew respected him the most at the time, eventually the creative guy like won everyone's hearts.
Yeah, I totally feel that, and I think that's also the one of the extrapolations you can make behind certain institutions that had political extractive natures and tried to introduce some kind of inclusive economic natures into those
It
institutions.
needs a balance, I feel, is the best.
I guess it depends because,
Except in cases of emergency, because those are emergencies.
see, the problem is that, at least according to their argument, you don't have sustainable growth with extractive political institutions
But you have
that
short term.
create. Yeah, exactly. You don't have sustainable long-term growth with extractive political institutions that underpin inclusive economic institutions. What you have is a very short-term kind of euphoric rise, and then it's gone. So
Nice.
a perfect case study into this is the Soviet Union, which was a very extractive political institution. It was dictatorship, and
Yeah.
then turned into a slowly but surely authoritarian regime of huge landmass, and then they controlled a lot of other countries within Europe and Eurasia as well.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely, they tried to introduce the economic aspects of growth, and they saw a lot of growth, but it all collapsed because they couldn't sustain control of so many different lands at the same time. And also, people are people. They're not going to want to maintain
someone else's
a regime.
success.
Yeah, or it's not that they don't want to maintain someone else's success. They don't want to maintain a regime that doesn't benefit them. Because
at the end of the day, it's always a matter of yourself.
Self-sustenance, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Ironically, right now, China seems to have found itself in a similar predicament.
How so?
Because they are very much a extractive political institution. As in, it's authoritarian.
It's true.
It is a CCP.
No, it's true. But
Right?
The reason China didn't die with all the other Soviet Union and all the Soviet allied countries of Eastern Europe is because they adopted capitalism in the nick of time.
Which is inclusive economic policy.
Exactly.
And so they are experiencing a lot of growth right now. But as defined by the book, and I mean, in my opinion, it's impossible to tell because it's too short of a time frame.
Of course. But,
But
even the Roman Empire fell.
yes, of course. As defined by the book, they are going to crash and burn.
Eventually.
I mean, I hope that doesn't happen, but of course, also from the ruins and the ashes, something amazing arises as well. That's always my hope for places, right?
Staying positive.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, they basically say that China mirrors the Soviet Union in a lot of ways, in the fact that they're growing.
Authoritarian.
They have authoritarian government, but they grow economically very similar to the U.S. or Great Britain, which makes no sense and makes sense at the same time, right?
They're weird. They're a weird case, but I respect it.
Yeah, of course.
Because it was a stroke of genius, really, because originally that wasn't how China operated during
definitely
the
not.
original
Mao was definitely very, very closed off. What was the word? Isolationist.
Yeah.
Very isolationist.
And whoever his successor was, he made the bold decision of opening up and saying, hey, let's start getting to work, but for other companies, not just for ourselves.
Well, yeah, so that was Deng Owen would laugh at how I'm going to pronounce this, but Deng Xiaoping.
That sounds right.
It's definitely not right, but it's
no.
close enough.
Is that's not the current leader?
So that's the leader that started creating more open policies for economics in China.
He saved China.
I mean,
basically,
in the short term, right?
It's a long short term, Pete.
Yeah, well, short term for nations is far different than short term for livelihoods.
Yeah,
right?
I suppose so. This era of China is still younger than America. It's true.
Very true.
So let's
Very
see.
true.
Let's see if they can reach the 200-year mark like their older brothers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, why not? But anyways, the drivers of democracy and how it affects economics, I think, are really the pillars of this theory that they propose as to why nations fail, basically.
Roll credits.
Roll credits. They wrote a paper. I don't remember when, but it was called A Theory of Political Transitions. And it basically models society in a game theoretic fashion. So, obviously, I want to talk to you about game theory a little longer in a future occurrence, but...
So, stay tuned.
Yeah. But today, the things that we want to know about game theory is that it's the theory of games, and you have to specify some rules for the game and initial conditions, and there have to be 2 players, or at least more than 1 player, in which one player can win the game and the other player loses. So, these initial conditions are societies are either democratic or non-democratic. There is a poor agency, a large poor agency, and a small rich agency. Just a bunch of initial conditions. And all these initial conditions, what they lead to is a sort of equilibrium that states this sequential game in which the rich first decide on taxation and level of redistribution, and the poor decide whether revolution is the optimal choice.
Yeah.
So essentially, the rich are the ones deciding how to financially underpin society, and the poor are the
Decide if
ones
it's okay or
the
not.
social. Well, the poor are more the social underpinning of society, right?
Yeah.
It's the two kind of pillars of their same theory behind political and economic institutions, just by two different castes,
Humans
so to
are
speak.
silly.
I mean, here's
It's monkey see, monkey do. You see
Yeah.
the rich guy do something, it's like, well, I want. Because let's be real here. You look at most of the time when you see a rich, successful person, you look at it in a positive light. You say, this person must have done something good. That doesn't make them necessarily a good person, because rich people can, you know, do bad stuff.
right.
God forbid.
Yeah, right.
But when you see them, the first instinct is like they're nicely dressed, nicely groomed, and they have nice stuff. So what do a lot of poor people do? They try to emulate it as best as they can. And a friend of mine, he said in like the 1920s, 30s, like rich people would wear like top hats and suits in public. So what did society do? They wore top hats and suits in public. Everyone copied them because this is what was like the I feel like cool is the inappropriate term, but I feel it's like this was the popular thing to do, because if the rich are doing it, if the like well-respected people are doing it and you want to be seen as well-respected, you're like, dress for success. So I'm going to dress like them.
I know. It's unfortunate that the affluent have so much impact on behavior, but
It makes sense.
no,
'cause
it makes total sense, of course.
The expression, it's like, what's the expression? There's like so many of them. It's like first impressions or dress for success. There's one with like your image, but basically the moral is
Look
like
good, feel good, maybe?
something
I
like
don't know.
that. You know, it basically, if you like look good, you increase your chances at like succeeding, even if it's by a little bit. Because if you look like homeless and disheveled and smelly, like you're most likely not, unless you're like a genius programmer like working in your basement, you're not going to succeed on average. You're going to be ostracized.
Of course.
So
Look
you
good, feel good, play good then. I
Yeah.
guess.
Sure. So it's a weird cycle where it's like society becomes a certain way, and if you want to live in society, if you want to make it in society, you got to live in society. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to go by society's current rules if you want to like make a name for yourself, or if you want to make it big, because you can't really make it big and do everything wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah, true. I mean, there's also those that choose to go against society, like Martin Luther King's or Nelson Mandela's, right?
Yeah, but
they
they're
went
it's a
against.
difference. There's a difference between like trying to change society versus trying to make it in society. I think like there's a difference between rejecting it because it's fundamentally flawed and rejecting it because you just don't accept it. Like I feel not accept is the wrong word. Reject it because you don't care for it, I think, is better. If, like, for example, let's say the suit example, if I was in the 1920s and I said, look at these people wearing suits, I'm not going to wear a suit. Or here's a better example. It's like, you know, that like stupid hypothetical that you hear on the media always, is like that dream where you're like naked in school,
Uh-huh.
and it's like, and everyone's like pointing and laughing at you.
Okay.
And there was a weird reversal of that where you imagine yourself in clothes and everyone else is naked, but they're still ostracizing you because you're the different one. And it's like it's a weird phenomenon, because I don't think weird, I think it's just unfortunate. It's like if you're the outcast, it doesn't matter how normal or sane you are, just so long as you're the outcast.
Uh-huh.
It's weird because people don't want to be the outcast, so they'll try their best to be in society.
Okay, I see. So, yes, you're right. There is a distinction because, you know, when you're an outcast, you need to rally people behind this idea, and hopefully it's a morally and ethically sound idea.
Hopefully.
Yeah. This just takes me back to the guy that took those people to South America. I forget what it was called.
Jim Jones,
Jim
Jonestown.
Jones in Jonestown, yeah. But anyway, so yeah, this sequential game, this two-stage sequential game, basically the potential loss of economic benefits by revolution, knowing that the poor majority would prefer, or what they would prefer, the rich have an incentive to propose taxation that doesn't provoke revolution. While at the same time, they also need to find a quote-unquote balance
Don't
that
steal
wouldn't.
everything.
Well, no, it's the taxation applies to everyone, right? So they need to find a balance to something that does not cause them or cost them all their benefits. Of
Oh,
course.
so as in they can't suffer.
Yeah,
Rules
right?
for thee, not for me. I understand.
Yeah, exactly. So, as a result, democratization just refers to the situation where rich willingly increase monetary redistribution and franchise to the poor in order to avoid revolution, which means a lot of society, unfortunately, has to work for the interests of rich agents.
Yeah,
In democracies, at least.
to a certain extent, but I think one very important thing, and I don't know if this book covers it, is the idea of social mobility.
I agree with that too.
Because
By the way.
yes, there are rich people, but who is the rich isn't always the same group of people. Like, yeah, you have Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, and who founded Amazon?
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, yeah. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that was the guy. Like, you have like your super duper billionaires and millionaires who will most likely stay in the top 1% forever. But like, there are people who are like at the border of the top 1% who sometimes leave the 1% and sometimes come back. They're not always that group of the elite, so to speak. And there are some people who go completely bankrupt, who go lose everything and then bounce back.
Yeah.
They for a brief period they were not in the top 1%, were actually at the lowest like 1% for a brief period of time. So in countries historically like India had no social mobility at all. You were born into your class, and if
You're caste, right?
your caste, which was what they called classes in their ancient civilization. And basically the premise is there is no mobility. You're born into it and you stay that way. So if you're born poor, you stay poor. There is no up in the social ladder. In America, what makes it one of, if not the greatest countries in the world, is that is not a thing. There's no one stopping you from reaching the highest peak. Now, is it easy? No. Are there barriers? Yes. Does it suck? Oh yeah. But you can do it. No one can legitimately stop you. Like, will people disencourage you, or will people like not like you?
No one can lawfully stop
Yeah,
you.
no one can
We'll say
like
that because there are barriers caused by social stigmas or social other occurrences.
it depends what you're trying to do, but like the main point is if you're like dirt poor, zero money to your name, you can still be like the next billionaire within a few years with a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
That's a thing in America. A lot of other countries don't have that.
Yeah.
So, that's why America's it's literally called the land of opportunity, is because
Right.
it's one of, if not the most opportunistic places on earth.
Well, when you think of it, America and other places, of course, has developed a inclusive economic institution that was created by an inclusive political institution. So that is also not completely true in my opinion, but they defined it in vague terms because, America and all other countries have a lot more nuance to their political and economic explanations.
Yeah, no country is the same. Even America, you go from one state to the other, it's vastly different.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we know that political inclusivity in the U.S. has not always been a thing.
We got better.
We got better, of course.
And we still get better. No one's born perfect.
Yeah, of course. No one. In reference to a country and a nation.
Name the perfect country. The Roman Empire fell.
There's no such thing, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's actually one critique I had on the book and the idea that they proposed. But we'll get to that after I have my first critique.
Oh, snap.
Yeah. So here's the thing for me. I'm a big people person, and I like to understand people. So when I see a book like that, or when I read a book like this, I read this stuff and I say, okay, a lot of this theory makes a lot of sense, and they have great use of historical evidence, great use of modern day case studies. The problem is it's too high level. I think they could go more granular with it. You know?
So how can they make it more like what layer is missing here?
Well, think of who make up institutions. People, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Short. In short. So people make up institutions, and of course institutions are big groups, big communities, just
Organized,
collectives.
yeah, in a certain
Organized collectives. There is an or not an underpinning. There is a fundamental psychological perspective that needs to explain a lot of collective behavior in institutional economics, I think.
So like
Because
institutional cultures.
not necessarily cultures, but rather the many different individuals that make up an institution develop some kind of schema or motif, not a culture, because a culture is something that you want to adhere to. At least I'm speaking from a company or startup
Yeah,
perspective.
of course.
A culture is something that you want to adhere to and create and make apparent that everyone can perpetuate. But what people actually do and how they act versus what they want to do or act are two very separate things, as we know. And ultimately, when you're starting a company, you want to bring people in that will live out that culture, right? You don't want to find people that are counter to it. The problem is that institutions don't work in the same way. You don't just bring people in. You build it from the ground up, and then people just come in whether you like it or not, because nations don't just, I mean, unless it's a nation like North Korea that has its borders closed off, nations are open to people that are, able to attain citizenship. Of course, those are very difficult things to do, but
Yeah, please follow the rules.
yeah, exactly. And as a result, you are now part of that institution, a part of that quote unquote culture.
Okay, fair enough.
So the behavioral and cognitive psychological perspectives are missing, in my opinion.
From the people side of things.
Yes, because like I said, institutions can be, broken down into people.
You could make the argument that that's a little too granular because people can vary. Yes, you can predict people on average, but on an individual basis, it's not like a guarantee or surefire thing. So maybe it would have been too hard to like study that kind of thing.
Well, what do you mean though?
You're basically criticizing that you need to analyze the people to analyze the institutes and see how the people are operating in the institutes.
I would say more the decisions that those people make.
Each people, each person's, shut up. Each thing in the people department,
Each thing.
they have their own goals, and they each on an individual basis they can vary. So why they do what they do might not be easy to analyze since each one has their own version.
But that's the point I'm trying to make.
So this is the missing
piece, because there are very big variations and or just in general outliers. There are total outliers when it comes to any type of organization. It could be good or it could be bad. Those things should always be accounted for when developing some sort of policy or when trying to at least define why things are the way they are.
I guess.
I mean, think of it in data science terms. You cannot just discount an outlier if it doesn't look good.
Yeah, but outliers suck in statistics.
I-
All my
You're a statistician.
assignments would make everything so hard because you'd have a perfect line except one dot, and it's well, explain that dot. It's some people are weird. Shut up, give me the A. But that's beside the point. But yeah, I get it. There are outliers. There are weird people who do stuff. I get it.
Yeah. So, look, I'm a fan of NIE because of the fact that it takes into account that, people have cognitive limitations. I am a fan of the book because of the theory it proposes that explains everything. I just wish that they could go a little deeper into the human condition of greed.
One step further.
Yeah. And
Sequel?
don't get me wrong, dude. This is a 500-page book. It's definitely no easy read. It's definitely an interesting read, though.
Let's make a sequel.
Patreon.com.
Patreon.
Sponsor us. No, I think that it's definitely a really well-written book, but it's missing some stuff,
One step forward.
So here's another thing that you sort of alluded to and I wanted to bring up. This was my other point.
All right. Hit me.
Inclusive systems allow different perspectives to enter in the political conversation.
So
correct?
so hearing other people's ideas.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Now, when we have other people's ideas, we have the possibility for polarization, correct?
Yeah.
It's just logical.
Disagreements arise, true.
Yes. With polarization comes
War.
Radicalism. Not war, dude. Okay, yes, war as a result of radicalism, but radicalism.
Yes.
Correct.
I agree.
Now, I didn't like the fact that there was no explanation for why a country with inclusive political systems can still have radicalized political ideologies and still be considered a successful nation. There is no definition for what a successful nation is in the book. And of course, we don't know what a successful nation looks like because we're in no nirvana or utopia, right?
Not burned to the ground is a pretty good
Okay, obviously, but
criteria.
My goal of defining a successful nation is one in which political and economic ideologies are all met and everyone is living in a utopian society.
Okay, good luck with that, Chief.
Impossible to happen.
Yeah.
I know. It's just a broad definition.
Here's the thing. Inclusivity leads to disagreements, and that on its own wouldn't be bad. It wouldn't, because it's good to hear good ideas. I literally gave a stupid example that's very barely related with the fisherman who, he had a different idea using a net instead of a spear, and originally he was ostracized and everyone turned against him. It was only after he proven that his idea has merit, aka food to survive off of, that people were like, hooray, good for him. And even the guy with the spear was like, hats off to you. I was wrong about you. Everyone accepted him immediately because the result speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Where the problems start to arise is the lack of ability to agree to disagree.
Yes.
Where people are willing it's weird to say this, but it's they're willing to include people and they're willing to hear them out, except when they're saying something they don't like.
Yes.
And then they take matters too far, I think is fair to say. Because if you don't agree with someone over something for something factual, it's okay, fine, there's one way. But a lot of things in life aren't pure fact. They're very opinion based, and your opinions are very much based on your life, which is very unique to you and you alone. So naturally, lots of people will have different varying opinions on life and stuff, our forte. But where the problems arise is when people can no longer tolerate different views, which is, I think, a very big sign of problems within that person. And ironically, what was the word? Inclusive? They're very not inclusive. Exclusive. Which is weird. It's very weird because this can only arise in an inclusive society. So it's a very strange like irony that exclusivity can only truly arise in an inclusive environment. It's a cycle.
That's very ironic.
It's a cycle,
It's
Pete.
very
You
ironic.
you have inclusivity, and then some group becomes the authoritarian that excludes everyone and gatekeeps everyone. Then there's a revolution, and then back to inclusivity, and back and forth and back and forth.
Well, you see, this is why I say that they're not going granular enough, because there has to be an explanation for why that happens.
People
and
are stupid.
no. Yes, but
History
no.
repeats itself.
Okay, my point is there's psychological
There are reasons for this,
foundations.
essentially.
There are psychological foundations for this.
Yeah.
So we know that to be true. And then I guess the last thing I really had to say was this was not a big point, but not a moot point either. It's more so, some inclusive institutions develop in some nations, but
Most nations.
Yeah, not all.
Western
Definitely not
nations,
all.
usually.
Yeah, Western, some European nations. I mean, Great Britain, for instance. Actually, this is the example I give.
Got it.
So, unless the same inclusivity diffuses with the institutions of other nations, extractive institutions will just form naturally. An example would be Glorious Revolution occurring, but Atlantic slave trade became a thing.
What's Glorious Revolution?
That was in England.
Oh,
Yeah, that was post-monarch.
monarchy?
Yeah, that was post-monarchies in England, in which the economy stopped really favoring the royal family, so to speak, and started.
Is that just the Industrial
Distributing.
Revolution?
No, it was before
Oh.
Industrial Revolution. Glorious Revolution was basically just starting to
People
slowly
make
move
money.
away. Yeah,
Okay, got it.
let's think of industry and prosperity and productivity
The
instead-
people were being
for
more
ourselves instead of for the king or queen.
Got it. That sounds good.
So yeah, that thing happened in England,
Okay.
but it didn't diffuse into other nations, and ultimately other nations that actively participated in one of the most extractive institutions of all time, which was Atlantic slave trade and then slavery in the South.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that where you look back into history and you think, okay, how could this have gone different? And then subsequently influence 400 years worth of history almost, right?
It's hard because society was different back then. What was normal to a man in the 1600s is not going to be the same here. And it's not fair to I guess maybe fair is not the right word, but you have to look at things from a societal point of view. You can easily use your 21st century modern man views and say, hey, those guys were pretty stupid. It's well, they didn't know that at the time, so to them, they were pretty smart.
No, of
And
course. Hindsight's
and-
2020.
And here's
I'm-
the thing: 100 years from now, our descendants,
Yes,
our descendants are going to look at us and say, "Man, these guys are pretty stupid," and because you can't judge something so far in hindsight. And you can analyze it to avoid it happening again, which would be smart, which is why no one's doing it. But that's beside the point. The point is, what's normal in society usually influences it. And
Yeah.
when normals change, it usually bleeds into other societies. For example, America was the first or I know, yes, Greece and the Roman Empire had something of a democracy as well and a republic, but the American one was kind of the first very decentralized one, and now most of the Western world has adopted it.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I guess what I really wanted to get across was it's not really a judgment. It is more of a let's analyze this so we don't do it again thing that you said.
That would be smart.
I mean, it would be really freaking great, but
not-
we never do it.
It's hard because people are people, and we always like to be oh, we're not like what our ancestors, we're smart. It's people are people. We make mistakes. They made mistakes. Their ancestors made mistakes, and our descendants sure as heck are making mistakes. I can see it. Just go on TikTok. and you'll know what I'm talking about. Need I say more? There's enough evidence on TikTok to last the next century on its own. So, no one's perfect, and people do things selfishly, whether consciously or subconsciously, because at the end of the day, we are animals and we try to survive. No, it's true.
I know.
And the ones who don't adopt this, which isn't even like really a notion since we're all kind of wired to be like this, it's, I don't want to say it's a competition, but it's like every person wants to be number one.
Yeah.
So it's a battle royale.
Yeah. To be honest, I'd ask you your thoughts, but you've already pretty much given them, unless you have a little more to add.
What's
to
the
it.
question?
What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have anything that you find a little inflammatory?
What was the premise?
The whole last 50 minutes of our conversation.
So about like the cognitive limitations of people?
No, it's just the theory that they proposed in the book, and NIE, kind of my critiques on their ideas, all of it.
Can I ask a question?
Ask me any question.
What is the difference again between NIE and traditional stuff?
NIE adds in the limitations of cognitive behavior.
So, and that means in layman's terms?
I want to sell you something,
Yes.
right? We don't agree on a price because you think it's not as valuable as the price I'm selling it.
Yes.
And so we decide to go through a middleman, say Amazon, who then becomes a de facto
price setter.
Yes. We create institutions in order to help us reach agreements
because
and
we're
conduct
not
transactions. Because we are not physically, we are
struggling.
I guess we are technically physically incapable of creating agreements and conducting transactions. Yeah.
I don't think that's entirely, because before,
I don't think it's true either, but on a large scale basis, it is.
Yeah, sure.
Nation to nation basis, it absolutely is.
Yeah, probably nation to nation. That's because it's a macro scale. Yeah, probably. But like before, money existed, before like the idea of capitalism, markets, and money, like coins and such, people would barter, which is basically, yeah. I have this, you have that. I will give you this for that.
Yeah.
So basically I have food, you have like a chair or a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
I'll give you this food for that wheelbarrow. So it's like that was an agreement. That kind of works.
Okay, but are we still bartering nowadays?
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like,
I mean, the reason our society has developed is because we have currency now.
Yes, I'm just saying, like, it's not an impossibility. It's just what used to be is quote unquote outdated by modern standards. But it showed that we could do it if we feel like it. Most people don't feel like it.
Most people really
the word
don't
compromise is really not something in most people's vocabulary, I think, nowadays.
Just people don't want to compromise, People don't understand that, hey, be nice to your neighbor. Or just reach an agreement. Let's agree to disagree if we don't, and let's use Venmo instead.
I really feel people just need to learn to compromise, because the world is not about all them, and they'll never get everything they want.
That's okay.
I think not, but hey, when you are striving to compromise or you're coming to terms with the cognitive limitations of people and nations, please remember,
people just need to stay positive
all the time.
That's it.
See you guys
later.